And we're live. Hello, Matt Orfalea here. I'm here to have a discussion about basic income with the perfect person to have a discussion about it with. That is Scott Santens.
Hi
Uh, yeah, Scott, why don't you introduce yourself?
there. Yeah, I'm Scott Santens, and I'm a moderator of the Basic Income subreddit on Reddit, and I write about basic income on my blog. I write about it on Huffington Post, and some freelance articles here and there. Appeared on Boston Globe and most recently Politico, and I've also crowdfunded my own basic income as well. Uh, and started the big Patreon Creator Pledge, which Matt is also a part of. And it's I just focus on basic income.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, and yeah, you mentioned this to me before. I totally agree. Like at first off, hearing that you've basically, so just to reiterate, Scott, he has crowdfunded his own basic income, uh, and just like and dedicated his time to focusing on reporting, mainly just on basic income. But the thing is, you can relate so many things to basic income, really practically anything.
Right.
You want to give a couple examples of that?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking about this yesterday too, and it's just I think it's tied into this finding that we've seen that the more people learn about the idea of basic income, then the more they like the idea, and so that's tied into why it's so important to get the idea out there, because as soon as you plant that seed in people's minds, then they do start to see things and read things, and they see it through that lens, and suddenly they start realizing that there are so many things that are as they are because we don't have a basic income. And so when we do have it, it just will affect just such a variety of things. And like even most recently, like the biggest news most recently is Brexit. Like everyone's talking about Brexit, and they're also tying that in with Trump as well. And why is it
Well,
that what is it about this? What is it about now in time where people are growing like more nationalistic and more like afraid of um, of like immigrants, and this more like just more of like a fearful population. And I would say that ties into this growing sense of insecurity. Like an insecure population is going to be more likely to be afraid of things because their lives are full of insecurity, and they see all these things around them. They see like the system itself. They see that some are benefiting far more than they are. They see like trade deals where the rich get richer and they just like lose their jobs and lose their incomes, and their lives become more insecure. So like this Brexit vote was like, it was really part of that. It was, I would say, that if the UK had a basic income, they would never have voted to leave, because the system would be benefiting everybody, and they would have secure lives, and they would not be focused so much on immigrants and their fears that made them vote that way. And so, that too is this, just like the most recent thing that you can see through the basic income lens, and you can apply that in just so many other situations in the news.
yeah, I mean, I honestly like in the whole. I mean, obviously the gun issue's big. Uh,
Right.
And personally, I mean, I when I keep hearing so much about it, I just really wish. I mean, I recognize that as an important issue, but I feel like there are larger issues that are at the root of the gun violence,
Right. Right.
like
And there are, yeah.
yeah,
If you
mainly economic insecurity. I feel you
Yeah,
would
no,
have.
there are studies to back that up. I mean, there are studies that show that
Yeah, please,
that
yeah, share some
it's not only
data
like,
with us.
yeah, it's not only poverty. It's not poverty that causes gun violence. What the best indicator is actually inequality, and it's this also this lack of even more so than inequality, is lack of social cohesion, which is actually part of this as well. So it's like this: you've got this lack of trust and this loss of, it's dividing the population as it gets more and more extreme and more unequal, that drives people to violence, and
Yeah,
that's really a good indicator. And so yeah, it's like this firefighter mentality as far as putting out fires instead of like trying to avoid them. And so I think the best way to this this Gordian knot of this gun issue here in the U.S. where we just can't seem to get anywhere, is just to really try to get underneath it and say, how do we just reduce people wanting to use guns violently?
Yeah. Make
How
them
is it
feel more safe. They feel unsafe,
right?
and it's because they are unsafe economically. They really are. And so naturally, if you're feeling unsafe, that anxiety that's gonna, I don't know, like exhibit itself, and like you're gonna fear other people. It's I don't know. I'm gonna worry. Might
Yeah, there's that aspect to it, and there's also the flip side of it too, is where you are just angrier at certain
yes.
groups in general. You're looking at like scapegoat groups,
Hmm.
and that's it's part of this animosity.
Cool. Yeah. And if you're just joining us, talking with Scott Santens, we're talking about basic income, which is the concept that we should just eliminate poverty simply by giving everybody enough money to lift them out of poverty. Everybody, no means tests. What's your like quickest, like succinct definition for basic income that you use, Scott? Do you have
I
one?
just like thinking of it as an income floor. So you're just raising it up from $0 to $1,000 per month. I mean, that I think that's the best way to think about it, is just this floor. It's a floor for everybody. It's a foundation. It's just this. It's a platform. It's this way of essentially like paving a road over poverty. It's like if you could think of poverty as like mud you can get stuck in, and that's has its own costs, and it's very, once you get into it, it's hard to get out of it. And you know, back in the day, we looked at all this mud around us and we're like, what would make sense is if we actually just paved some roads, and then all of a sudden people wouldn't get stuck, and it actually was good for business because costs of doing business went down. It was good for profits. It was good, like before, back in the day, you had to be like a millionaire, like in Louisiana, to travel from like even from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, because you're like driving through swampland, and your cars would break. Everyone had like higher costs of keeping a car, because it would hurt it, like traveling, and people were prevented from getting to schools and to hospitals, and like all of this stuff was because we didn't have roads. And then we just decided to pave the roads, and that really just it created opportunity for everybody to travel like they couldn't before. And so that's what this is. It's just a way of creating more opportunity for everybody, and so that they're not getting, they're not affected negatively by poverty. They're not trapped in it like they are in
So
the country
let's see.
right
Well, I got you. I gotta ask you, for all the viewers, they're gonna want to hear. They got two big questions, and you've heard them a lot probably. So how do you argue that giving everybody money won't make them lazy? And then the other big one is, how do we actually pay for it? I know I've read about a lot of interesting, clever ways to generate money, but um, does one stand out to you, or a few?
now. Oh yeah. Okay. So for the first point about the working, it's really, it's important to understand the way the current system is, especially, and that's I think a lot of people don't know the details of the current system, and I think when you do, it's easier to see why this makes so much sense. So as an example, like right now, when people are given welfare, then because it's mean tested, as they earn additional income, then it's pulled away from them. And when you do that, you're effectively taxing people at rates of 80% and beyond. And so we don't tax anybody 80% and beyond. In fact, we would say that that would be a work disincentive. People say, "Oh, you can't tax the rich to a degree, or else they'll stop working." And well, so what we do that at the very bottom. The for a vast, large majority of the population gets this kind of huge tax because they're punished for earning income. That's the way the system is set up right now. But with the basic income, it's never pulled away from you. Like every bit of work that you do will always add to your total. Like you get a part-time job, then you're better off. You do some work here and there, you're better off. You get like just a temporary work, you're better off. Like all of that's true. Whereas right now, you could actually be worse off by doing these things.
Yeah.
When it comes to like housing subsidies and stuff, like this housing assistance, like would you get like a job, earning extra money if you somehow like lose your housing assistance. They're essentially you lose your house. Then of course, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. And then like why like the way that it functions even right now with like 1 out of 4 who qualify for housing assistance gets it. And so you've got this population of where 3 out of 4 people who need it don't get it. And then the people who do get it, they get like housing vouchers where not everybody accepts it. It's not the same as cash. You
Mhm.
only people can decide whether to accept it or not, and therefore you end up like in like the hands of slumlords who are the only ones who are accepting these things. So the way the system works right now is just completely a work disincentive, whereas
Yeah.
basic income changes that.
Removes the current work disincentive.
Right, and that's for just the labor market stuff. Whereas, I mean, we need to also see what is work and what's valuable work versus what we see as like paid work and jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
So like there's so much work going on that people are doing because they want to do it even if it's not paid, and that too is work. It's valuable work, and basic
And
income
in
allows
fact,
people to do
I
that.
mean, yeah, usually the most important work. I mean, raising families, growing a community, um,
Right.
it, and and then my God, and just like informing people, like, because the current like I don't know, just like media, the way it works. Obviously, most people we get our information from the media, but the way
Mhm.
it's set up now is everybody is incentivized to put out stuff that's just going to get attention, not necessarily like educate anybody or inform anybody to, to make to make the public more informed. So I
Right.
don't know.
It's generated around like click views and stuff. Like
Yeah,
what
which
can I
is
do to get people to
yeah,
click on this? Like I don't care if they read it or not. I just want them to click on it, and then I'm better off. Like yeah, that's the
yeah,
way a lot of things work. And yeah, this why should we have things set up that way? Let's incentivize it so that people can focus on what they feel is most important, and therefore they won't be focusing on just like these kind of click kind of situations and just like monetary rewards and whatnot. They can actually
yeah.
focus on what gives them purpose, autonomy and mastery and purposes, like intrinsic motivation. That's what we want to focus on.
Let me ask you about there was a huge vote in Switzerland about whether to establish a basic income in their country to give everybody, what was it, 2,500 or
Yeah,
what
it
did
was
you say?
2,500 Swiss
2,500 a
francs.
month, Swiss francs a month.
Right.
Um, Unfortunately, now first let me say this. Hearing about this, when did they announce this? Was this like 2013, 2000?
Yeah, that was when
Yeah,
they got the signatures.
yeah,
So that was the process where they turned in the signatures, and then it took a few years, and then they voted on it.
yeah. So once they got these signatures 2013, then it was like set. They actually have this interesting thing, like where you can get something on the ballot to be voted on if you get enough signatures from
Yeah,
the
it was
citizens.
100,000 signatures.
Hmm. I, we don't have that in the U.S., do we? Like
Well, states have it, but not in
okay.
the U.S. as a whole.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
there's 26 states with the ability to do things like that. So that's why like Washington and Colorado legalized marijuana because they have these signature initiatives that they can get on the ballot and people vote on.
Okay. Um, so that is what piqued my interest in this. Obviously, it's inspired me to write and make videos about it. Is that what piqued what introduced you to the idea?
Yeah, no, I knew of it before that, but not too much before. I think I was really introduced to it like around like August 2013 or so,
Okay. Okay.
and yeah, it was
Was it a
actually
certain
through Reddit.
Reddit? Cool. Yeah. Well, that was how I found out about it too, about the initiative. So, like 3 years later now, just this month they actually voted on it. Scott went down to Switzerland. Tell us what you saw. Tell us what you heard. What happened?
Yeah, so it was great to be a part of this, and like going into it too, we actually like the group there, the Swiss group, were hoping for or expecting a like a 15% of the population to vote yes, and like before the vote, the anything over 20% would have been considered a victory. Anything over 30% would have just been like, wow, that's crazy, and 40% would have just been insane. And so when it was over, it was 23.1% the total vote was. And so that was something to be really happy about. And when you think about it, that was so 100,000 people got signatures, signed their names to vote on this, and then almost 700,000 people voted yes to do this. And that was in a major country. This is an entire country voting on this idea that the whole world is still like disgusting, and it's talking about like pilot projects, and it's only starting now to become considered more like of an actual option. And here's a country already voting on it, so that was a big deal. And I also when I wrote an article about the Swiss thing afterwards for Politico, and the what I discussed there was there's actually another really interesting comparison in Switzerland, and this was decades ago. And what they did is I can't remember the dates now. I think it was like I think it was 59 maybe, where they voted on something in the same way. It was an initiative. It was a referendum signature thing, and they voted it down. Like a third of people voted yes, and then 12 years later they did it again, and this time they voted, or the first time they voted no, and this time the next time they voted yes. And so it was, I see that as the same kind of situation. And what that was, that original referendum was actually to give women the right to vote. So you can think of something as crazy, like, oh, like a lot of the media said, oh my gosh, oh, that bill got trounced, like 23%. What a terrible idea. And you can think that they thought the same thing with that. They're like, women to vote, what a terrible idea. That's crazy. It'll never happen. But then 12 years later, they did it again, and suddenly it wasn't crazy. They said, yeah, that
People
makes
had
sense.
time
Women have
to
the right to vote.
to be informed about it, learn about it,
Right.
open their
So
minds
that's where
to
we
it.
are right here. Is
Yeah.
yeah, it's 23% now, and I expect that, and they even expect this too. They did polls on this, and they do. Most of the population there expects that they will do another referendum on this, and will they vote yes that time, or will it take another referendum? Either way, at some point in the future in Switzerland, they're going to vote yes on basic income. So when will that be? I don't know. Maybe it'll be 6 years from now, or 8 years from now, or 10 years. I don't know.
Now they have to go through the whole process again of getting this hundred
Yeah,
thousand signatures. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it would even be easier,
Oh,
than it
sure.
was, because
People
again,
will
more
actually
people know
know
about
what
it.
they're
Right,
talking about.
right.
What-
And another important thing that about this as well that I feel was kind of miscommunicated, and it's kind of like a lost in translation effect from like country to country, is that 2,500 Swiss francs is not the way that people tend to convert it. It's not $2,500 as you would just convert it over to U.S. currency, because there is a great difference in purchasing power. So stuff over there is just more expensive. Your dollar does not go as far. Like I experienced that myself when I found that it was like 15, $20 or something on average just to have like a quick meal or whatever. And this is like you go to Burger King or something and you spend like $15 for like a burger and Coke and fries, versus here in the U.S. where you're not going to spend 15, $20 on this.
Mhm.
So when you consider the purchasing power parity, then in the U.S. it would kind of be more like having like 1,700 $1,700 in basic income, and
Per
then
month.
on
Yeah.
yeah, per month. And then on top of this is that also in Switzerland they're mandated to buy private health insurance. So it's kind of like Obamacare here. In which case, if you're mandated to buy this, then you have to be given that money as well to purchase it. So it wouldn't
Hmm.
make any sense, to not include that into the basic income. So it would be, again, it would be like in the U.S. having you'd be given $1,000 of basic income and like $600 in Obamacare subsidies for private insurance, or just cash for this. So it's actually very similar. It was actually very similar to like $1,000 a month basic income in the U.S. It was not some crazy high amount. It made sense for
Hmm.
Switzerland, I feel. And also, they weren't actually voting on the number either. It was just that was a tool of communication. Like they were just voting on essentially the right to a basic income high enough for dignity. Really, that
Hmm.
was like the wording.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, didn't pass. But I did read. your article on it, or one of them at least. Maybe you've had a few.
Yeah, there were a lot.
Yeah. Where, and so it seems like, I mean, people under the, younger people still see it as kind of inevitable. It's kind of like
Oh
an
yeah,
older generation, younger generation thing. Like, like so many things these days.
yeah.
Like,
40% of those 18 to 25 in Switzerland voted yes. So that's very much a generational difference. And again, you saw this like in Brexit too, where
exactly.
the millennials voted to stay versus the older generation said leave. So yeah, this is something where the younger generation really sees the need and the sense of this because they're the ones that are finding it harder to get a job. They're the ones saddled, with more loans. They're the ones in a labor market where it's no longer like these full-time career situations, but instead it's like these more independent subcontracting, temporary, independent kind of labor situations where it's just not the same security that it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, our safety nets, they're not set up
Right.
for this kind of work environment.
Yeah,
Um,
they made sense a century ago, but they no longer make any sense. Like one of the crazier numbers I've seen recently was that here in the U.S., 3/4 of the bottom 20% of earners, their incomes vary month to month by 30%. So that's a huge variance in income. How are you supposed to build a life when your incomes are varying by a third essentially every month? Like, and
so
then
unstable. Yeah.
right, and then can you imagine like forcing people to fill out forms to go through this process and then get some assistance one month and then like you don't need it the next month and then the next month you need to
That's what
do the forms again and to go through this. It makes
that's
no
what
sense.
sickens me so much. It's just, yeah, every month we have enough resources, shelter and food. Throw away 40%. These are my stats I love. 40%. We throw
Right.
away 40% of the food that we produce here in the U.S. And yet we have so much. We have childhood poverty, hunger, and likewise, 6 vacant homes for
Hmm.
each homeless American. That's
Right.
that's nuts,
It is.
nuts.
Yeah.
Um, and yet we have to have people apply every month to see if they can get access to to see if they're worthy of access to this. And it's just so
Right.
absurd. Um, let's see. Uh, okay, I also just wanted to ask you. So, like a lot of the figures, so there's a lot of positive numbers. Like the majority of citizens did expect that this would be something voted on in the future. Um,
Mhm.
and was this all based on exit polls, or what was the, you know?
This was like an independent study done before the vote that was released right after the vote. The
Okay,
polls closed.
okay. Do we know how many people were uh, interviewed
We're,
or questioned? How many people were in the study?
Yeah, it was a representative study, so it was intended to be like an accurate depiction of like the entire country.
Sure, sure.
Um, it was a legit
Legitimate study.
um, yeah poll study. It asked a
Cool.
lot of interesting questions.
Okay, let's see. Interesting question. Speaking of interesting questions, um, okay. Well, you saw the my recent article on like why Bernie supporters should support basic income.
Yeah, it was
Makes
great.
sense
I
to
loved
me.
it.
Yeah, I mean, his message, it just completely aligns with basic income, and you
Yeah,
can just so many. I mean, I see there's so many quotes, regular things that he says that it's just, oh my, it's just the stars aligned. Like, God, I wish he would just come out and talk
yeah.
about
There
it.
are also multiple Bernie crats that are also pro basic
Mhm.
incomes. Who are those
Robert,
like
mhm,
yeah, who
Robert
are
Reich,
like
right?
Tim Canova? Well, like those who
Oh
are running.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. The
and
person opposing Debbie Wasserman Schultz, or running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz to be
right.
head of the DNC. Jeez, very exciting. Yeah. Oh, but here's what I'm. Okay. Well, what do you think of this? So it makes sense to bring this to attention to Bernie and encourage him to talk about it. But how about Donald Trump? Um, like, doesn't it also? Could it also make sense? Could you
Yeah.
see him? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot
I
of
mean, I could see him
uh,
doing anything. That's
yeah.
the
Well,
problem.
that's also why I almost have like see it as possible. option. I mean, I don't really, overall, I do not like Donald Trump. He's very dishonest, like back and forth, back and forth. But, um, but because, he is not afraid of, you know, trying something new or saying, going against,
Right.
uh, political correctness. And also the fact that, I mean, come on, the guy, he can brag and brag about how he's created all this out of a small, $1 million uh, inheritance from his dad.
Right.
Um, so with that, I mean, he's open about that story. With that as his story, I mean, how can, if you're a president of the United States, doesn't it make sense to give this just a minimal, you know,
Right.
monthly
Right.
lump sum to every American and give them this opportunity to build something up? I mean,
Yeah,
uh,
it makes sense. And the thing is too, like he has said, is that he doesn't listen to advisors. Like it's only him.
yeah,
So if he happens to get to reading about basic income, and then he's like, oh, this is a good idea. He doesn't really care what others think. He's just will do it. And if he reads and he
yeah.
decides he doesn't like it. But then again, he just goes back and forth so much. It's
Yeah,
just like a total wild card.
I know. I
Who
think
knows?
it. So, do you think it would be? I mean, I almost think it's still kind of worth like just like trying to bring it to his attention and reach out to like Trump supporters just to introduce them to the idea.
Well,
What do you?
I
Yeah.
think it's important to spread the idea everywhere. I mean,
Oh,
like I've said,
sure, sure.
not left or right, and so I
Yeah.
want support to build on the right, and I want support to build on the left, and
Mhm.
I want and also expect that there's going to be different versions. So they're going to want having different preferences, and then
Yes.
we need to, with both people wanting the same thing, they can then sit down at a table and then hammer out the details because they're both invested in getting this to happen. So there's going to be some give and take. There's going to be some compromise, and I think the result of that will actually be the best actual result. Like I don't see like the pure left version as the best version, and I don't see the pure right version as the best version, at least as
Mhm.
far as like general details go. Like I do believe that it's really important to replace a lot of our current programs, whereas a lot of those on the left are really kind of worried about that, and they want to mostly keep like basic income as like as an
An
additional
additional thing.
program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and just there's so much wrong with the current system that I just think that would be a horrible outcome. But on the other side, like I do not want to remove like everything. There's no reason
Yeah.
to get rid of everything. Like especially where we're getting rid of like Medicaid and Medicare. I mean, no, no, like
Yeah.
healthcare is different. It's a separate issue to be treated separately. And I
I
think
think it's I agree with you on that, and I think and part of why I think it's because it's a separate. What makes it separate and different is the fact that okay, everybody needs food and shelter. You know this.
right,
Whether how much somebody needs for medical care, like that's a wild card that's constantly changing.
right.
So yeah, different different
And
thing.
also, when it comes to like even the difference between private insurance and like Medicaid or something, you know, um, that's another thing where it causes this kind of cliff where people actually are pretty happy with having Medicaid. It's considered better, and then if you work enough, like let's say you get a new job and you're really happy about that, and then you lose your Medicaid because you're earning too much now, and now you're in like the private exchange, marketplace, and then you need to get yourself like an Obamacare kind of program or whatever, and then you can actually be stuck with stuff like higher copays and even like like limits that don't pay as much as it would have. So then,
Uh, we lost you, Scott, or I lost you. Uh, let's see. Are you there, Scott? Scott, are you there? Hello, hello. Oh, and looks like he's coming back. And he's back.
lost it for a second.
That's all right. Okay, and he came back for the big question that we've all been waiting for. Um, what is your favorite, or tell us some ways that we could actually fund this? Um,
Yeah, so we already spend a lot of money on all our programs, like we've been talking about. And I think the best way to go about this is to eliminate a lot of programs, eliminate a bunch of subsidies and tax credits and loopholes and deductions and all this stuff in the tax code. Simplify that, make more sense, and also partially eliminate some programs. Like we can reduce the amount of, let's say, Social Security and disability, and then add that on top of basic income, so that even they are also all better off. But at the same time, you're saving money, because it doesn't make any sense to give $1,000 extra to someone on receiving, say, $1,500 of Social Security. Like, why is it that they should get that much more, whereas you can just replace some of it? And so, there's a lot of money that we're already raising that we can shift towards basic income in a way that makes sense. And then, of course, then you're not left with as much money to, with as much of like this hurdle to cover. It's not a $3 trillion cost. It's less than that. In fact, it's even more so less than that, because this is gets kind of confusing too. Is that it's actually kind of more like a negative income tax as far as like the cost goes. So, because what you're doing is there is that crossover point where there's going to be net payers and net receivers. Like it's why some people are confused. Like, why are we giving a basic income to Bill Gates? Well, Bill Gates is paying for his basic income and the basic incomes of a lot of other people. Like that's a lot of income,
Paying
and
more
so
taxes than he would be
right.
getting. Yeah.
So a lot of this goes down to at what point is there people net paying in and net receiving, in which case the cost of basic income is a lot lower than people think it is, because you just need to look at that total amount that you're transferring and not like giving to everybody. So that's a little bit more confusing, but it does lower the amount of money as far as like the true cost, because it does not make any sense to say that if I give you $10 and then ask you to give me $10, the cost of that net transaction was not $10, it was zero. So that's the way the basic income goes too, is that you're giving $12,000 to somebody who has a lot of money, and then you're asking $12,000 from them, in which case it's zero. So there's no net cost there. So it's a lot cheaper than people think it is. It's more like the cost of negative income tax, which a lot of economists love as being something that makes a lot of sense. It's a lot more affordable. Then as far as like how we generate the revenue that we do need, how do we tax essentially the top 20% mostly, in a way that makes more sense? Like that's where you get into some really interesting questions. Like, do we want to do something like a value added tax? Which I like that idea. I like a 10% value added tax, because combined with the basic income, it becomes it's not regressive. It's actually kind of like subsidizing purchases throughout the entire economy based on mostly purchases on the top. It's like a billionaire buys a new yacht, and suddenly everybody else can actually buy milk and eggs and bread and all this other stuff, because you've taxed that and then shifted it to everybody. So that to me makes a lot of sense. And let's say a 10% value added tax could raise like $750 billion, which is a nice covering
Yeah.
of most of the cost of a basic income.
And does
But
sorry to cut you off, but that exists in many other countries, the VAT tax, where like
yeah,
it's
it's
just
really
like a
popular in
on
Europe.
sales tax. It's like an additional sales tax, something like that, or
Yeah,
a
so the
different
value
version
added
of the sales
tax,
tax.
yeah, it's like a sales tax. It's effectively like a sales tax, but instead of a sales tax is only put on the end. It's only on the final transaction. It's like the amount that you pay at the point of sale. Whereas value added tax is added through each step in the process, like from like the original resources to like the next manufacturer or whatever, and then to like the point, like it goes up along the way, and you're adding each way. So the way that the reason they do that is because it's you're like each step along the way is incentivized to get the money for that, because they'll get it in return. It's a way of like kind of distributing the like I don't know, like how getting people to pay this versus like kind of the ability to avoid it at the only the point of sale.
Yes, yes. Oh, and that's what is so attractive to me about, I mean, the land value tax.
Right. Yeah.
And another thing attractive about that, well, first of all, is the fact, if you're taxing, I mean, you're familiar with this, but for the viewers,
Yeah.
like if you're taxing land, it's hard to you can't dodge that tax. You can't hide your land in, an offshore banking account. But also this simplicity of it. I love that's what's attractive about the basic income. You eliminate all this, unnecessary complexity. Um, Same with these. Potentially, you could just use a single value added tax or land value tax.
Yeah, yeah. I
I mean, yeah.
I love the
Um,
idea of a land value tax, and for a lot of different reasons, and it's actually a whole good discussion of its own.
yeah.
Because again, land value itself is socially created. So in which case, that makes the most sense that everybody should benefit from this instead of just some people. Like since everybody is creating the value here. Like imagine if you take like a $1 billion piece of property in New York City, and it's right next to Central Park, and then you just magically transport that to like the middle of the desert where there's absolutely nothing. There's nobody around. There's no electricity. There's no water. There's no plumbing. There's no people. And what's the value of that now? It's not $1 billion. It's practically nothing. It's like whatever the cost of the rubble is. Like that's the cost. So the value of that $1 billion in New York City next to Central Park is created from everybody in New York City. Like they're the ones creating that value.
And the
And in
public
fact,
transportation funded by public
exactly, funded
dollars.
by
Yeah.
dollars. Yeah. And the really interesting thing
Public
about this
roads.
too
Yeah.
is like there's actually so many people who do not live in the United States, who are not paying taxes, who are actually buying these properties in like Manhattan. So in which case they would be paying the land value tax, which is something that would reduce the tax burdens for everyone in the U.S. So
Mm.
that should be another interesting way to get people to like
Yeah.
this. Is like, oh well, let's get the foreigners to pay for our income. That's fine.
Yeah,
Like,
include that in the pitch to Donald Trump.
right, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very progressive to do land value tax because again, it's one of those things where if you don't own land, you are very much a net receiver. You're not paying any land value tax and you're receiving the money from it. Whereas if you own land and you're paying it, then it's more like a net. It's neutral. It's like you're paying and receiving, so you can be no better off or worse off. But if you own like 10 properties or 100 properties or 1,000 properties, as as is true when you have a lot of money, then you're going to be taxed more. So it's just naturally a very progressive tax that mostly targets those who own the most. It's like it's a great tax on wealth essentially versus a lot of others.
Mhm.
So yeah, I really like that idea too. I don't know about how as feasible as it would be on a national level to do to do that as part of
Mhm.
the universal basic income. I actually kind of like the idea of doing this on a more of a local level. So like even like having cities and states do it. So again, like if there's so much value in New York City, and they're the ones carrying the cost and creating that value, then like if you're living in somewhere else, why should you really see as that as much as it would be if you live there? So if you do like a New York City like land value fee and dividend for people in New York City or in New York State, that to me makes a lot of sense, and that would actually be in addition, or it could be in addition to the basic income. So people would receive $1,000 from the federal government as a national basic income, and then they would receive from New York or New York City like a $500 per month dividend or something like that.
Yeah,
I
and let me just
like that.
plug this. I saw a good documentary, "Real Estate for Ransom." Did you see that one,
Yeah.
Scott?
Hmm.
Yeah, so check that out if you're interested in this land value tax. And there's other ones. Search Henry George. There's so yeah, I found some good resources.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Hmm.
look into that for anyone who's not familiar with it. But yeah, a carbon fee and dividend is another thing I really like too, like a carbon tax. And so then it's again, what kind of taxes make more sense? If we look at tax as something that reduces something, like if we that's why so many people don't like an income tax because it's saying that that reduces the amount of work people do because it's de-incentivizing or whatever. So if you think about things that way, and we want to reduce carbon, then we should want to tax carbon. And so that's why, I mean, a lot of people who really care about climate change and like actually tackling this, it makes sense to raise the price of carbon so that you actually, by raising that price and by giving everybody a dividend, it not only gives more people more choices, as to like maybe instead of buying as much gas as they do, maybe they want to cut down a little bit and have and save more of that income that they earn from the dividend to use in other things, or maybe they want to use that extra money to pay for like LED bulbs or solar panels or whatnot. Like it opens up so many more choices, and it actually makes the green economy that much more competitive against the carbon economy because that's the one being priced, and the green economy isn't. And in fact, we could even subsidize the green economy if we wanted to even create that further. But I think the most important part is to actually just increase the cost of CO2 pollution.
Yeah. And
So I like that.
Scott's also written on about how it could even be funded with a flat tax, right? I mean, there's just many, many, many ways to do this. So
Yeah, and if you combine these two to get if you combine these things together, um, then you could also actually not only flatten income taxes but reduce them too. And I would think
yes,
people should be interested in that.
God, oh yes, yes, that'll get some people's attention, really,
Right.
because I mean, the first thing people say, oh, his basic income has got to be funded in taxes, which they associate with the income tax.
Right. But is
Yo,
that
so
really
so
though?
really, yeah, this really could be funded with it while eliminating the income tax, truly.
Right. That's
And
that's the flexibility of a basic income is that there's so many ways to pay for it. And another thing that I really like too is this idea of citizen seniorage, and it's being talked about kind of more like as helicopter money and quantitative easing for the people. But there's different versions of doing this. But really, what it's doing is it's just creating new money. And people will hear this and think, "Oh my gosh, hyperinflation." But the thing is that we are always creating new money because our economy, is always growing. And as you have a larger population and there's more goods and services, you need to have more money for that. So creating money is just part of the process. And the question is, do we let banks create that money? Because that's what we're doing right now. Like 97% of the money is created by banks in the forms of loans and debt. Like every time, if
this
someone
is
takes out
yeah,
a mortgage, that
this is
creates
another huge other topic. I mean,
right,
that's also related to everything.
right.
So yeah,
So
keep on going. Sorry.
yeah, so right now we're letting private banks, private institutions create a public resource, which is money. Everybody needs money, and yet they're the only ones benefiting from its creation. And so, why do we do it that way? So, what we could do if we wanted to is to actually change that, and so that banks don't create new money anymore. They just keep it for us and they invest it, and they do what actually most people think banks do without having any knowledge that they actually create money. And so it'd be like creating a system where people think that's how it works. And so we could do that way. And then the money that we could create in the hands of everybody. That's what the citizen seniorage part is. Seniorage is creating money. So we would shift that from banks to people. And if we do that, so if we created, let's say, $100 per month of new money, instead of letting banks do that, in which case that wouldn't be creating any inflation whatsoever because we're just shifting the new creation from the creation by debt from to credit for everybody. The same amount of money, just different way of making it. And if we did that, then in order to fund $1,000 a month basic income, then you'd only need $900 a month in taxes instead of 1,000 because you're getting $100 of new money. So you could use that to reduce the amount of taxation that is required. And I just think that makes more sense, anyways. Like you said, it's its own discussion.
Yeah. Oh my God. Even regardless of basic income, just the way money is
Right.
created is just insane. The fact that,
Yeah.
yeah, that when banks loan money, they're creating it out of nothing. Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Of
And
course, I mean, yeah. Well, of course, when if people pay it back, uh, it cancels out the new money, but still, it's it's a very messed up system.
right.
Uh,
Yeah. And so another part of this as well is, citizens Norwich is slightly different than helicopter money, and it's been interesting to see this on the rise as well in the conversation globally as well. So, Bill Gross came out recently talking about universal basic income, and he's a multi-billionaire, and he's handles Janus Capital, which is a large over $1 billion fund, and he's very respected in like the banking and investment community and stuff, and he believes that we're going to need a basic income because of advancing technology, and his preference to start paying for this is with helicopter money, with just printing it. It's saying, okay, well, let's just let the central bank create this money, and instead of giving it like in
So
quantitative easing.
instead of getting it from taxing rich people like him.
Right, exactly. Like it should not be a surprise that
Yeah.
he wants this way, because that would reduce the taxes on him. But the fact
Yeah.
is that he and others like him are talking about this.
No,
So,
yeah, lots of venture capitalists. It's
right.
amazing. Yeah.
So they're worried about deflation, not inflation. They're worried about not hitting those targets that we want, that how we want a 2% inflation. Like we're not hitting that, and they're thinking, well, consumption is falling, inequality has gotten too high, the economy is doing poorly, slowing down, the engine is slowing down. How do we do this? How do we speed this up? And so that's that tool that hasn't really been tried yet. Is this what's helicopter money, dropping the money on top of everybody, like Milton Friedman talked about, like Ben Bernanke's talked about. So I think that that's going to start happening at some point. And when it does, that will be something that, again, reduces the amount that we need to raise in taxes via basic income.
Okay. Cool. Good stuff. Can I ask you, yeah, as we wind down, let me ask you one different question. All right. You told me when we hung out you would like to write a screenplay someday. Is that
Yeah, well, I've
I don't
written
know if
one
that's because
before.
you may have been drunk or what. No, no.
No,
Okay,
I
it's a
enjoy
legitimate
that.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you. Um what's what's a scene that you see? Just like describe one scene. Well, for me, I kind of share a similar like goal for making a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, like, yeah, just describe a scene, whether it's like, something you would write in a screenplay or something you've seen, like a clip you've seen on the news or in a YouTube video or from a movie that you could see used as a documentary that just would really help illustrate why basic income is important.
It's
Different
interesting
question.
question.
I'll give you well.
Shoot, I was just thinking earlier about a twist on this, and gosh, now I can't even remember what that was. It's a good idea, just for interested writers. It's always a good idea to write these ideas down. It's usually when I'm in like that kind of mode, I'm always writing these ideas down, and it's not one that I jotted down. But
I'll, sh-
gosh,
Let me share. I'll share one that I just one thing I saw, well, video clip that I saw that I just thought it was just so powerful. Like then that would go in like the next Michael Moore documentary about basic income or whoever
right,
makes it.
right,
I mean this poor woman has a child with cancer. I mean they're just dirt poor, barely getting by with the current government welfare system. The little girl, I mean, she's obviously this adorable. She has just terrible, debilitating cancer. She's in a wheelchair, and so they use one of these GoFundMe sites to raise money to help, you know, get them out of this horrible situation. Just try to make their very difficult life better, right?
mm-hmm.
And as soon, but here's and it was, I mean, a wonderful story. If people reached out, made you feel good, made you feel hopeful. But then you find out that upon uh, hearing about this or receiving this money, their welfare was completely cut off. So then all of a sudden they're right back down to where they were. In fact, even a worse situation, because that money, that one time donation from the community is just a one time thing, and they're off of their regular welfare thing. I mean, it just just tore out your heart. Anyway, so that's
Yeah.
like there's an example for you. That I've got that one written
You
down
know,
somewhere with the link. Yeah.
it's funny too. Just that example that essentially happened in the Netherlands with their My Base Income project there. So are you familiar with
Oh,
it? So there it's
Netherlands. Oh, is it
yeah, like owns
ac-
common, I think, or
oh, the German? It's not the German ones.
no,
I'm
German.
only
So the
familiar
German
with
one
the
is
German one.
Germany.
My
That's where it started. That's with
oh,
Michael Bohmeyer, and they've given
mhm.
out like almost 30 or 30 base incomes so far for a year's worth of base income.
Yeah. So
And then that model went to the Netherlands, and they
okay.
started up a group there, and they've given out a few, and
So
that
just for people,
goes
this
to the
this is
U.S. and
just
stuff.
just a private small group of people got together just to called just the My Basic Income Project in German,
Yeah,
and just kind of as soon as they raise enough funds for somebody to get like we'll say 12,000 a year,
right.
to give someone a basic income, they give somebody a new person a basic income, and just to make people more familiar with the concept and just see what happens uh, to people's lives.
Huh.
Does it change for the better or what? So yeah, so I guess so it's new to me that there's a similar thing in the Netherlands and what happened.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
just so that actually that model was carried to the U.S. and there's a group here doing that, and that
Oh,
was
that's right.
also
That's
and
right.
there's a group in Switzerland that started doing it too. So this idea even has been growing country by country. But to go back to the original point was that the second person, I think it was in the Netherlands, to be awarded that basic income, they were in that position where they were already on welfare, in which case they're receiving benefits, and then that would cancel out. So it
Oh,
was like, well, thank you so much for this, but I like, what do I do with this? I can't,
oh,
if I get it, then I'll lose this, and I don't want to I don't want to take people's money that they've donated, and then just all it does is reduce the benefits. That's it. So that it was kind of a real example of
mm,
how that works. And that's even what they're worried about too, like in like the Oakland experiment with Y Combinator is, what happens if you give some money to people, and then what if that reduces their what they're receiving, so they have to like give them more or whatever. So
mm,
that's just it's difficult because of the current system. But yeah, so I was thinking the what I want people to think of as like a scene
mhm,
is just imagine like this young kid who is working in let's say he's working at a in a fast food place, um, and he he hates his job. He There's a lot of other things that he's even thinking about, and he would like to work on, but like he's coming from a poor family, and he needs to work to help the family earn money. So he doesn't have any time to like go to school or anything, even if his parents could afford it. And so he's just kind of like locked into this, into poverty and working poverty. He's just so busy working, and he doesn't really have the time to spend on things, to think about. And I just want to keep people to think like, what if this person is actually like a second Einstein? Like what if that if his family had a basic income, and if he did, if that would change things to the point where he could actually focus on the stuff that's in his head, and he could go and he could learn, he could get that education he wants, or he could teach himself online. That there's you just to create that time that's necessary to really work through these things. Like Einstein, didn't just come up with this stuff. I mean, this was, and he could not have done it had he been working 60 hours a week, in
yeah,
some like office job or whatever.
yeah,
Like, just how many people out there, if even one, if there's just one other Einstein right now stuck working, instead of being another Einstein. Like I would say that one person, the lack of that one person having a basic income, pays for everything, because that would, I mean, Einstein changed everything with his one mind, and the just what is the cost of these other Einsteins out there not being able to pursue what they want to pursue. I think that's something to really think about.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, Einstein he created the nuclear bomb. But no, sorry, that just ruined it. But no, that's a great point. And God, there's so much evidence and just common sense that suggests that. I mean, really, if you want to increase innovation, just people just need leisure time to think. Just it's, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've even learned that myself, just in the way, just my process and how I go about like writing. Like I and I don't feel guilty like taking time and just like focusing on other things where I'm not just worried about researching or writing or whatever. Like, because that's where the ideas come from. Is like people need to enjoy their weekend. People need to enjoy their nights off. You have to have that time. Like, there's so many ideas I just come up with in the shower, just because like
Yeah.
I'm not really thinking about anything, and like
Yeah,
that's
and
where the ideas come from.
most people don't even have time to think in the shower. There's like
Right, right,
in, out,
right.
at least
Just trying to
5
get
days
out.
a week. Yeah.
Yeah, right,
Oh man. I mean, I'll tell you what, like first time I had been working like 40 plus hours a week for many years, and then I had a part-time job. So I had to like find myself with like, some free time. Like I had uh like 20 less hours, 20 more hours like free.
right.
And I really like I must have been the most boring person before because all I could talk about was like television. That was, working in television editing. Like that's all I could talk about. It's like, oh,
Right,
this and oh my God, like this is what's happening at work now. Da, da, da. But with that time, oh my God, I discovered Reddit among other things, and just became so like interested in like learning all this new stuff that's available to to learn all these
right.
interesting topics, automation, futurology, anyway, all kinds of great stuff,
Yeah, it's
interesting
so much
stuff.
like it's so much of it is time based. Like real what it comes down to as far as like the power of basic income and that like transformative potential, it really comes down to the control of people's own time. Like if it gives people the power to say, I don't want to work for you at least at that wage or for that amount of hours. Like here are my conditions. I want to work for this amount of hours and this amount of pay, and I want to do this with my time. I want to work on a podcast. I want to work on playing the guitar and, or writing or science even. Like, there's so many things that people could do self-directed, like intrinsically motivated, and that's really like the most powerful, most successful, I would even argue like high quality work, especially over time. Like people need to be able to do something repeatedly over and over and over again, and that's what people love doing, is getting better at it. And if we want people to be intrinsically motivated and to have that space to get really good at the things that they enjoy most, like that's basic income is the way to do that, to create
Yeah,
that
they need
space.
time. They need
Right.
some free time to do that. Yeah. uh, cool. Well, is there anything else, Scott? What do you think? How, would you just like to
Well, let's
make
see.
any more points, or go straight to plugging your websites and stuff?
Well, you mentioned earlier about what kind of big things are around the corner. Like
Yes.
what's next
Yes. What's
after
next? Now
what's
after
next after Switzerland.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's a good discussion, and it's there's could be some guesses involved there, and who would be the first kind of politicians really like in the U.S. to like take this up. Bernie Sanders hasn't done that. Those
Mm-hmm.
who like Bernie Sanders, those like I said the Bernie crats, whatever the down ticket kind of people are talking about it. Maybe there's going to be somebody who wins their seat in Congress or something, and they're really big into basic income. Um, it'll be interesting to see that, and we'll see this elsewhere in the world. Like what's going to happen in Canada? They're going forward with their pilot, actually with someone who's been a long time advocate even of this idea. Like in Finland, you've got the pilot starting up in 2017. That's going to go to 2019. That's going to be a big 2-year thing. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are looking at. So
Some
that's around
hard
the corner
evidence.
too.
Yeah. Well,
Right. And even after post Brexit, like people still are looking at, okay, so in Britain, is that going to make it even more possible to do a base income there? As far as like, people were worried if the concern was that it usually is kind of a big concern about immigration, then if they just kind of removed that problem as far as they saw it, as far as people from the EU being able to immigrate to the UK, maybe they could start talking about that there because the Labour Party is already talking about that much more in the UK. So maybe something can happen there. Maybe also post Brexit, it's really interesting to see how uh, we could see an independent Scotland and an independent Ireland. And Scotland, the Scottish National Party, uh, they are very into the idea of basic income. So and they have talked about how in independent Scotland would like to a basic income as like a foundation of this. So it could be that we'll see an independent Scotland. Maybe they'll be we expect them to be voting again soon because of what just happened. And if that's the case, they very well could be one of the first countries to have a basic income. And same thing with Ireland. There's support there, and like the party on the right, Fianna Fáil, is very into the idea of basic income.
if only we
And
could get and if we could get freaking Jill Stein on the debate stage, we could.
right, and yes, she supports the idea, and it'd be great to see her talking about it, like and then during the general election somehow, and just really get the idea out there more.
Do you think it will come up this
During the
election?
general elections,
Yeah.
you know, I there's a distinct possibility that it
Let's go
could.
for it.
And a big part of that too is I mean, I think it's amazing that Obama was just asked about basic income. Like that just
Oh,
happened. Like
I mean, I've heard him talk about
that's
automation finally and how that, how big a deal that is.
yeah,
But I didn't. What did he? Okay, what happened? I
yeah,
didn't
this so
catch
this
that
is
actually.
this is the big news is that I think it was Bloomberg Media Group sat down for an interview with him, and of course you get your limited amount of time and you have a limited amount of questions and you're with the president, so what questions do you ask? And they asked him specifically about a universal basic income as far as automation. And so that in itself, I think, is huge news. Like even apart from his answer, the fact that we've reached the point where the media is asking the sitting
Yes.
president about this idea that still so few even know about.
Yeah.
That's big news. That I've wanted
Yeah.
to see that the whole time um, that I've been in.
How did he dodge it a bit, or what was his
He actually
response?
gave a really, I think, a good answer, and it was. I mean, it's a very political answer, but it's
Yeah.
not. I wouldn't say it's annoyingly political. I feel it's one of those things where he expressed as much support for the idea of basic income and the need for it without like saying the words. And I think universal basic income was a really good way to do this. Like
Hmm.
he pointed
Hmm.
out, like we're looking at a future where you've got more, like AI and self-driving cars, and what happens to those people. And I think we need to, we need to take a new look at the way that at these old institutions that we've set up, like as for that we've set up for an older labor market. And it was a good answer, and I recommend people looking up exactly what he
Yeah.
said. But that did just happen, like
Yeah.
matter of
I
days
saw
ago.
that, I saw the headline and I thought it was referring to him talking about the automation of jobs, which he in a recent town hall, which I saw, where it's, there's some good sound bites from that too. But
Yeah, he has talked about it in automation and technology in really interesting ways.
very
He
recently,
did
though,
it
yeah.
at the State of the Union. I think he did a good job
Uh,
in that speech as well. Like the most recent State of the Union, he talked about automation. But yeah, I feel that it's one of those things where he recognizes the problem and he actually does like the idea, but for whatever reason, politically, he can't or feels like he can't like actually come out
yeah.
for it. So, you know, that I think is good, but I think the best part about it was just that the question was asked.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing actually just happened yesterday, or last night even, and that was a well-known member of like the ruling party in India uh, wrote about basic income and how India should do this. And he actually went into the experiments there in India, and how like good it was for business, and how that India should start going that way, like testing it, starting out small, whatever. And so again, this is like another nice step forward where maybe India is going to start being a lot more serious about this, because it's obviously reached the point where
Oh my God, yeah,
someone like
and
him can actually talk about it in that way. And that's what we're seeing like in country after country
all over the world. I mean, like
all over the
I
world.
saw videos like somebody in China talking about it. Isn't there like a basic income Congress in South Korea or something?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, the Basic Income Congress is actually coming up in July. I think it's July 7th or 9th, I think it starts. Um,
that's close
right
soon.
around there. So it's really soon. And yeah, that's in Seoul this year. I was hoping to make it that, and I couldn't do that. But yeah, that's just around the corner. And there's an event also in Canada um, that's also happening soon too. And I think that's the World Social Forum, I believe, and there's going to be Basic Income is going to be talked about. There's going to be a presence there. They're also going to have like their own create-a-thon as well.
Oh right,
Yeah,
is that just the third one or
so that's not like it's their own version of the create-a-thon,
Create-a-thon?
and so that
So
would be
just for everybody, so the Create-a-thon is an event started in San Francisco. A bunch of people, basic income advocates, come together and just create media and projects to promote the idea of basic income. And
yeah,
the idea is to kind of try to make it like a kind of a viral event thing.
yeah, like a hackathon style thing, just see what people
There you go.
can come up with.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's coming up in Canada. And yeah, there's everything going on all over the world. I mean, who's going to be next? Like you mentioned China, and I like to talk about that too. And I would like to write an article about this as well at some point, because I really want them to start thinking about this. Is that China's in this really interesting position where, of course, they don't have a democracy there. It's just up to the people at the top to decide what's best for China. And so here you are faced with this problem where consumption is falling, like in the U.S. and elsewhere, because we don't have the money to be the consumers that we used to, and they're interested in a middle class of consumers, but you've got people there not earning enough to be consumers, and so they could see this as a consumer income and a
Yeah. I
way
mean, God.
to create the
Yeah.
middle class.
And since most of their jobs are, or
And
is
yeah,
it
they're
most out of are repetitive, manufacturing jobs or just
yeah,
repetitive jobs?
yeah. So and they're also heavily automating.
Yes.
Like Foxconn and the 60,000 jobs
60,000
that they
jobs.
took
Yes.
away. They know, they're looking at this, and they see automation as being something that will make them more competitive at the global level, and so they're very interested in doing this. They're not going to stop. They want to automate as much as they can. At the same time, they want a consuming middle
Middle
class.
class.
So at some point, I feel they're gonna, like, a light's gonna go off in China's head, and they're gonna think, okay, we can do this. This is the way to go. We're just gonna start a basic income here and create our own middle class, so we can buy our own stuff, and robots will
Yeah.
make it. And like that's, I fully see that that's going to happen
Yeah.
at some point. I just don't know when. I have no idea
And
when
oh man,
China
in
is going
fact,
to
it
start
might make sense for that to happen there, maybe even earlier than elsewhere, because so much manufacturing goes on there, and that's like one of the first. That's the most where automation is most prevalent, I think. Uh,
Oh yeah, no, they're
yeah,
they're they're heavily investing in automation.
yeah, yeah.
They're all about that. So yeah, who's going to be the first country to do this? Yeah, like who, we may think that that Switzerland can do it, or that maybe Canada will, because they're like the ones, and Finland will, because they're the ones kind of most into it right now. But some country could come out of nowhere.
Hmm.
Maybe it'll be China. Maybe it'll be Scotland. Because again, Scotland doesn't exist as its own country yet independently, and so like the world could see an independent Scotland, and suddenly, boom, basic income, like, came out of nowhere. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see who that
See where
ends up
this goes.
being.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. It's exciting. I just hope it happens. You know, well, I'm still allowed to see it. Uh,
Yeah, and it
um,
would be nice to see
and
the
I think there's a
U.S.
good
do
chance. I
that.
think I really think there's a good chance it'll happen, but sometime in my lifetime. I really do.
Oh no, I,
Yeah.
I think that's a very, very good bet, especially as long as we're living for a while.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe the heightened life expectancy might
Right.
help us
No,
out.
but I do expect us to. I mean, the goal of my personal goal is that we get a basic income in the U.S. before 2025, and that's a tough one. That's going
Mhm.
to take a lot of work, but I think that technology and its exponential nature is going to really start surprising people and
Yeah.
scaring people,
Oh yeah.
and they're just going to continue looking more and more at this at an accelerating rate.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can see it in the graph somebody posted uh, in on the basic income subreddit, just how
Right, the
the
growth,
search
yeah,
for basic
little
income is
trends.
just yeah, more and more people are reading and writing about basic income.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
I encourage everybody to do that because no matter how much you think that people are talking about this, and like, oh, everyone must know about it by now. Like, no, that's not how it works. Like,
yeah,
you have to
yeah.
really talk about something and write about something a lot. Like, what would be your guess as to how many people in San Francisco know about basic
Hmm.
income, heard about it
Hmm.
before? Like, this is San Francisco. This is where there's a lot of support from
Yeah.
Silicon Valley.
Do you have a number? Do you actually know, or
Yeah, I have a
are you
number.
just? All
And
right.
just
So you want me to guess? Can I
yes,
guess?
yes, yes.
I'll say 20%.
12%.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You're right. That makes. I
So
guess I
if
was being optimistic.
so
Yeah.
if 12% of San Francisco
Mm,
knows about it, then what about like the middle of Arkansas or somewhere in
yeah.
Mississippi or like where all over the U.S. like who are not like focused on technology and who are not reading and everything they can get their hands on and
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean,
whatnot.
most people don't have time. I mean,
Right.
they just don't.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
If you're working three jobs, if you're working 60,
yeah,
70, 80 hours a week just to get by, you are not spending your time like on Reddit. You're not like
yeah.
spending time on social media and reading all
You
these
you're
things.
spending your time. Yeah, I mean, you're spending your time working and sleeping.
Right.
uh, yeah. I hope I continue to have a little bit of time. We'll see. um, so with that said, me and Scott are both on Patreon. Patreon.com/orf over here.
Yeah,
Scott.
patreon.com/Scott Santens over here.
All right. You got any questions for me or any creative ways to end this? Hmm.
Yeah, so I was curious. Are you going to make a video out of the recent, Bernie Sanders article that you did?
Yes, yes. Uh, and yeah, that's what you may have heard when you thought
Right.
like you heard me talking to myself. That was me like editing the voiceover for for uh
Yeah, 'cause
for
I
that
like the way
video.
that you do that. How you have your articles and the videos so that you can embed the video in the article and have that both even.
Yeah, that when I yeah, because it's like just to help organize my thoughts. Sometimes it just makes sense to do the article, and also, God, makes so much takes a while for me anyway to make a video. So geez, just to hold on to the article to my outlines, like why hold on to it? Just put it out there.
Right. It's like for the most part when
Yeah.
you're making videos, you're making a script for the video too. So you
Mhm.
might as well like turn the script into its own shareable,
Yeah.
readable kind of item. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I
Um.
look forward to that next video for sure.
Cool. Cool. Oh, I got you. So in your trips and at the all these basic income events,
Yeah.
like have you got to meet Rob Reich yet? Any like stories of bumping into some you know big profiles that we might be familiar
Well,
with?
I was really excited to meet Gotts Werner when I was in Switzerland. So that's another you know billionaire that I've met. Gotts Werner really kind of started this movement really started the conversation like in Germany, and then it spread to Switzerland as well.
Name's familiar. What's what? How do he make his money? What does he do?
Uh, Gotts Werner started. Gosh, it's I don't even know. I don't remember the name of it and how to compare it to the U.S. It's kind of like maybe like a CVS or a Walgreens or something, but it's a very large chain of stores, and
Okay.
yeah, so he's really well known, and he's known about the idea of base camp for a long time, and he's talked about it a lot and inspired uh, many people as well.
Dude, tweet him my Patreon. Oh,
Yeah,
did you see? Yeah.
and I was just gonna say, and I was
Uh-huh.
also was excited to meet Daniel Hani and Schmidt too. They like if you've watched
I
the
know Eno Schmidt.
documentary.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a 2008 documentary, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was
So
like one
yeah.
of the earlier things that I watched, and I really enjoyed that.
Hmm. So yeah,
And
if it's an old documentary, if anybody wants to see that, is it the first? Maybe even about basic income.
yeah, so they made that movie specifically to start laying the groundwork
Uh,
for the referendum in Switzerland. Like that was like
yeah.
their long-term goal.
Hmm. Yeah,
Like
it's. Hmm.
that's really what you need. As you start, you're like, okay, so we're gonna do this. This is gonna take a while, and then a few years later, we'll get the signatures, and then a few years later, the referendum will hit, and yeah, this takes time. So that's the kind of stuff that we need to start looking at, like here in like
Yeah.
the U.S. and other countries. Like, really, can we do to get towards that goal?
Yeah, we need some movies like that, like a little more modern in English.
Right.
Probably,
Yeah,
um,
that's it. We just need the media focusing on this more.
yeah,
Like,
and we are the media. You're doing a good job, Scott. A lot of people are.
yeah,
I'm working on it too.
that's the thing about social media is that really has given more power, to us, and we can even create that, let's say, incentive for the classical, mainstream media to even go after it. That's I think even is seen like in Switzerland how that like so much media coverage came from Switzerland voting on this, and so that was like social media helped feed into this, and then they started covering this, and it's also, I mean, it's really, I think it's important that people read everything they can, or at least click on everything they can, even about basic income, for the same reason we discussed earlier, is because like if you're like a mass media outlet, you just care about clicks. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily writing these basic income articles because you think it's a good idea. You're doing it because it's getting traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more traffic that these places get, the better, because they're going to publish more and more. That's their incentive. So the more that we share, the more that we feed into that, then that creates that incentive, and then that builds. So I think that's just like the least thing you can do as far as to like be part of like the basic income movement is to read these things, and better
And
yet
share an
share
article.
them,
Yeah.
and better
Yeah.
yet write them, better yet produce some things, and help those get those out there too.
I agree. um, cool. So where do I see you next? How do we end this? What's our like basic income bros, or what do we do? Shall that be it? Why don't we each just I'll yeah. Why don't you just like give everybody your info, your medium, whatever. We'll do our goodbyes, I guess, and then afterwards, if if there's
All right,
anybody
all right.
else you want to talk about.
Yeah. So if you want to follow my writing, I blog on scottsantens.com. I've edited the Medium collection, the basic income collection on Medium. That's medium.com/basic-income. And on Twitter as at to know me. That's a 2NOAME. And I blog on Huffington Post and all this. You can find all those links on those places.
Cool. Yep. Likewise, Matt Orfalea, my YouTube channel here, youtube.com/orf. Same, I'm on Medium, contribute to the basic income collection, medium.com/@orf. Likewise on Twitter. All right, Jesus. And that'll do it. Thank you so much,
All right.
Scott.
Well,
We
thanks for
went on
having
for a
me.
while there. Thanks for
Yeah,
sticking around.
yeah.
If anybody made it through, good. Props. All right. Hopefully that was somewhat interesting, informative. Okay.
Yeah.
See y'all later. And all right, broadcast out.